on Christmas Eve. The city square shimmered with 10,000 lights, but on the bench beneath the giant tree, a lonely billionaire sat motionless. Serafina Hart stared at the crowd without really seeing it, fingers tight around a cooling cup, heart long frozen since the night her mother died. She was rich enough to buy the whole street, yet had no one to call. Then a single father stopped a few steps away, lifted a worn guitar, and softly played the one Christmas carol she had secretly loved as a child. With the first notes, something in her chest finally trembled. The square pulsed with the kind of warmth that only Christmas Eve could bring to New York City. Vendors sold steaming cups of cocoa and gingerbread cookies from decorated stalls. Children laughed and chased each other through the light snow, tugging at their parents' hands, begging for just 5 more minutes beneath the magnificent tree that towered at the center of it all. Couples walked arm in arm, pausing to take photographs, their breath visible in the cold air as they whispered promises about the year to come. A group of carolers stood near the fountain, their voices lifting in harmony as they sang hymns that had echoed through centuries of winters. Everyone seemed to belong to someone. Every face in the crowd reflected connection, purpose, the simple joy of being wanted and needed. Families clustered around the pretzel vendors. Friends took photographs. Lovers stole kisses beneath the mistletoe that someone had hung from a lamppost. Everyone except her. Serafina Hart sat on a wrought iron bench directly beneath the tree, her cashmere coat pulled tight against the December chill. At 32 years old, she was one of the most photographed women in American business. The CEO of Heartwave Media, her face a fixture on magazine covers and financial news segments. Her blonde hair fell in soft waves past her shoulders, and the diamond ring on her finger caught the light with every slight movement of her hand. She looked exactly like what she was, a woman who could afford anything the world had to offer. But the cup in her hand had gone cold an hour ago, and she had not taken a single sip. Every carol that drifted across the square sent a small blade through her chest. She had trained herself over the years to avoid Christmas music, to schedule meetings and conference calls during the holiday season, to fill her penthouse with silence rather than memories. Yet tonight, something had pulled her out of her tower and down into the crowd. Perhaps it was the anniversary. Perhaps it was the way the snow fell exactly as it had fallen that night, soft and relentless, covering everything in white. Her mother, Helen Hart, had died on a Christmas Eve much like this one. Serafina had been 12 years old, still young enough to believe in magic, still innocent enough to think that love could protect people from the cruelty of the world. Helen had been a musician before she married into the Hart family, a songwriter who never achieved fame but who poured her entire soul into every melody she created. She had written a carol just for Serafina, a lullaby that she sang every December, a song that existed nowhere else in the world, the night of the accident. Helen had promised to sing it at the hospital where she volunteered. She never arrived. A patch of ice, a truck that could not stop in time, and then silence that lasted for 20 years. Serafina's father, Henry Hart, had dealt with grief the only way he knew how. He buried himself in work and taught his daughter to do the same. Emotion was weakness. Sentiment was inefficiency. Christmas became just another quarter to close, another campaign to launch, another set of numbers to optimize. He sold most of Helen's belongings within a year, including the box of cassette tapes where she had recorded her music, including the tape marked simply 4S. Serafina had never forgiven him for that. She had also never told him. The Hart family did not discuss feelings. They discussed market share and acquisition strategies and return on investment. And now her father was gone too, dead of a heart attack 3 years ago, leaving her alone at the helm of an empire she had never wanted. She watched the families around her and felt nothing but the vast, cold distance between herself and the rest of humanity. That was when she heard it. A guitar began to play somewhere nearby, and the melody that emerged was so familiar, so impossibly specific, that Seraphina's entire body went rigid. Her fingers tightened around the paper cup until it crumpled slightly. Her heart, which had been beating at its usual measured pace, suddenly lurched into a rhythm she did not recognize. It was her mother's song, the carol that existed nowhere else in the world, the lullaby that she had believed was lost forever. She turned toward the sound, her eyes scanning the crowd until they landed on a man standing near the base of the tree. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with brown hair that fell slightly across his forehead in a way that suggested he cut it himself. His jacket was thick but clearly inexpensive, his jeans worn at the knees, his boots scuffed from years of use. He held a guitar that looked older than he was, the wood scratched and the case strap fraying at the edges. Beside him stood a little girl, perhaps 7 years old, with blonde hair pulled back in a ponytail and eyes the color of a summer sky. She wore a puffy pink coat and a hand-knitted scarf, and she swayed gently to the music her father played, her small voice humming along with the melody. Flynn Cole had not planned to play this particular song tonight. At 36, he had learned that plans rarely survived contact with reality. He had planned to finish college. Then his mother got sick. He had planned to build a career as a musician. Then the bills started piling up. He had planned to grow old with his wife, Amanda, to watch their daughter Audrey graduate from high school and college, to sit on a porch somewhere and remember all the years they had shared. Then the cancer came, and Amanda was gone within 18 months. Now Flynn worked 3 jobs. He cleaned offices at Hart Tower from midnight until dawn, mopping floors and emptying trash cans while the executives slept in their expensive apartments. He delivered packages during the day when the companies needed extra drivers, navigating the city streets in a borrowed van, hauling boxes up flights of stairs for people who never looked him in the eye. And on weekends, he played guitar at coffee shops and street corners, earning tips that helped cover the gaps between paychecks. It was not the life he had imagined, not by a long shot, but it was the life he had, the life his daughter needed him to build, and he was determined to make it good enough for Audrey. Tonight was supposed to be simple. Bring Audrey to see the big tree, play a few popular carols, earn enough tips to buy her the art supplies she had been wanting, then head to Hart Tower for his cleaning shift. But Audrey had looked up at him with those eyes that were so much like her mother's and said, "Daddy, play the special one, the one Mommy loved." Flynn could never say no to that request. The song had come to them by accident, or perhaps by fate. The universe had its own plans, and sometimes those plans revealed themselves in the strangest ways. Amanda had found an old cassette tape at a thrift store during her second round of chemotherapy, when she was too weak to do much besides browse the dusty shelves while Flynn searched for affordable winter clothes for Audrey. The store smelled of mothballs and old paper, the kind of place where forgotten things waited patiently for someone to give them purpose again. The tape had no label except for 3 handwritten words. The ink faded but still legible. For S, Amanda had bought it for 50 cents, brought it home, and played it on the ancient cassette player they kept in the kitchen, the one that had belonged to Flynn's grandmother. The melody that emerged had made her cry. "It sounds like a prayer," she had whispered, like someone wrote it for a child they loved more than anything in the world. Amanda had played that tape every day for the rest of her life, during the treatments that left her exhausted, during the nights when the pain kept her awake, during the final weeks when she knew she was not going to win this fight. She made Flynn promise to keep the song alive, to play it for Audrey every Christmas, to let their daughter know that somewhere in the world, there were people who created beautiful things and left them behind for strangers to find. Flynn kept that promise. He played the last chord and let the note fade into the winter air. A few people had stopped to listen, and some of them dropped bills into the open guitar case at his feet. He nodded his thanks, his fingers already moving to the next song, something upbeat and familiar that would keep the crowd happy. Then he looked up and saw her. She was standing directly in front of him, close enough that he could see the tears on her cheeks. She was beautiful in a way that seemed almost unreal, like a photograph come to life. But it was her expression that made him pause. She looked like someone who had just seen a ghost. "Where did you learn that song?" Her voice was low and tight, as if she was struggling to control it. Flynn blinked, surprised by the intensity of her question. Most people did not recognize the melody. Most people just smiled and moved on. "This song, my wife found it on an old tape. Nobody knows who wrote it." The woman's face changed, cycling through emotions too quickly for Flynn to track. Shock, pain, something that might have been hope. She opened her mouth, closed it, and then tried again. "I know who wrote it." Audrey tugged at Flynn's sleeve, looking up at the elegant stranger with curiosity. "Do you like Mommy's song? She went to heaven, but Daddy says she can still hear us when we sing." The woman's composure cracked slightly. She knelt down to Audrey's level, her expensive coat brushing against the dirty snow, and said, "I think your mommy must have been a very special person." "She was." Audrey agreed. She found the tape at a store. It says "For S" on it. "We do not know who S is, but Daddy says maybe S needed the song too. Just like us." Flynn watched the woman's face and saw something break open behind her eyes. She stood slowly, brushing the snow from her knees. And when she spoke again, her voice was barely above a whisper. "S is me. My name is Serafina. My mother wrote that song for me before she died." The world seemed to stop. Flynn felt the weight of the guitar in his hands, the cold of the air against his skin, the presence of his daughter beside him. He thought about Amanda playing that tape in their small kitchen, about the way she had closed her eyes and let the melody wash over her, about the last words she had spoken before she slipped away. "This song saved me," she had said. "Promise me you will share it with everyone who needs it." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out the cassette tape. The plastic case was yellowed with age. The handwriting faded, but still legible. "For S." Serafina stared at it, as if he was holding her mother's heart in his hands. "I need to hear it again," she said. "Please, somewhere quieter. I will pay you whatever you want." Flynn almost laughed. He had spent years learning that people with money thought everything could be bought. But there was something in her voice that was not arrogant. It was desperate. It was broken. It was the sound of someone who had been alone for a very long time. "I have to work tonight," he said. "Cleaning shift at Hart Tower starts in 2 hours." Something flickered in Serafina's expression. "Hart Tower. I know that building. What if I told you that you could play the song there somewhere warm, somewhere private, and still make your shift on time?" Flynn hesitated. This was not how his night was supposed to go, but Audrey was looking up at the woman with undisguised fascination. And somewhere in his chest, he felt the faint pull of something that might have been destiny. "My daughter comes with me," he said. "I do not leave her alone." "Of course." Serafina's voice softened. "I would not expect you to." An hour later, Flynn stood in the lobby of Hart Tower, holding Audrey's hand and feeling completely out of place. The building was all glass and steel, with a Christmas tree that looked like it had been designed by committee and approved by lawyers. Security guards in crisp uniforms watched him with barely concealed suspicion until a woman in an elegant suit appeared and waved them through. "Miss Hart is expecting you," she said. And Flynn realized with a jolt that the mysterious woman from the square owned this building. She owned the company that paid him minimum wage to scrub toilets and vacuum carpets. She was his boss's boss's boss, separated from him by so many layers of corporate hierarchy that she might as well have been a different species. And yet she had knelt in the snow to talk to his daughter. The elevator carried them to the top floor, to a penthouse that Flynn had only ever seen from the outside when he cleaned the windows 3 floors below. He remembered looking up at these windows during his late-night shifts, wondering what kind of person lived in a space that seemed to float above the world. The space was enormous, all floor-to-ceiling glass and minimalist furniture, with a view of the city that made the Christmas lights below look like scattered jewels. Every surface gleamed with the kind of cleanliness that came from professional maintenance. And Flynn realized with a twist of irony that people like him probably cleaned this space every day. A fire crackled in a massive stone hearth, casting dancing shadows across the marble floors, and another tree stood in the corner, this one decorated with what appeared to be actual silver ornaments, each one perfectly spaced, each one probably worth more than his weekly paycheck. Serafina was waiting for them, changed out of her formal coat into a soft cream sweater and wool pants. She looked younger without the armor of her professional attire, more vulnerable, more human. Audrey gasped and ran to the window. "Daddy!" "Look, you can see the whole world from here." Flynn set down his guitar case and tried to find his footing in this strange new reality. "I still do not understand. Why did you bring us here? You could have just asked me to play the song in the square." Serafina was quiet for a moment, her eyes fixed on the guitar case as if it contained something sacred. "Because that song is the last piece of my mother I have left, and I needed to hear it somewhere that felt safe." She paused. "I have not felt safe in a very long time." Flynn understood that feeling better than she could possibly know. He sat down near the fireplace, tuned his guitar with practiced fingers, and began to play. The instrument felt alive in his hands, responsive to every subtle movement, every shift in pressure. He had been playing since he was 12 years old, taught by his uncle in a cramped apartment in Brooklyn, and the guitar had seen him through every major moment of his life. He had played at his high school graduation, at his wedding, at Amanda's bedside in the hospice room where she took her final breath. The guitar knew all his sorrows and all his joys, and it gave them back to him transformed into something beautiful. The melody filled the penthouse, wrapping around them like a blanket, and Serafina closed her eyes and let herself remember. Her mother's voice, soft and low, singing her to sleep on winter nights. Her mother's arms, strong and safe, holding her when the world seemed too big and too frightening, the way the world had felt when she was still small enough to believe that love could protect her from anything. When the song ended, the silence that followed was not empty. It was full of everything they had both lost and everything they might still find. Audrey had fallen asleep on the sofa, worn out by the excitement of the evening. Flynn covered her with a cashmere throw that probably cost more than his monthly rent, and turned to find Serafina watching him with an expression he could not quite read. She told him about her mother, about the accident, about the years of silence that followed, about the way her father had stripped the house of every reminder, as if erasing Helen's existence could erase the pain of losing her. Flynn told her about Amanda, about the diagnosis that came out of nowhere, about the months of treatment that took everything they had and still was not enough, about the promise he had made to keep their daughter's world full of music and hope, even when his own hope felt like a candle burning down to nothing. "Your wife found my mother's tape," Serafina said, her voice thick with wonder. "Out of all the thrift stores in the city, out of all the tapes on all the shelves, she found it. Flynn nodded slowly. Amanda always said it found her, like it was waiting. Maybe it was. Maybe my mother's song needed to save someone else before it could come back to me. They sat together as the fire crackled and the city glittered below. Two strangers connected by a melody that had traveled through death and loss and somehow emerged on the other side. Then the door opened, and everything changed. Clinton Ward was 45 years old, silver-haired and sharp-eyed, the kind of man who had learned to weaponize charm the way others learned to use a knife. As chief financial officer of Heartwave Media, he had spent years positioning himself as indispensable, the steady hand that kept the company profitable while the young CEO played at leadership. He had plans for Heartwave, plans that required Serafina to be vulnerable, to be controllable, to be desperate enough to sign over the power he craved. Tonight, he had come to the tower expecting to find her alone and anxious, easy to manipulate. Instead, he found her sitting on the floor with a working-class man and a sleeping child, looking more relaxed than he had ever seen her. He smiled his most dangerous smile. "Well," he said, his voice dripping with false warmth. "What a charming domestic scene. The CEO of Heartwave Media spending Christmas Eve with the cleaning staff. The board will be fascinated." Flynn stood immediately, positioning himself between Clinton and Audrey. Serafina rose more slowly, and Flynn watched her face transform from the open, vulnerable woman he had been talking to into something harder and colder. "Get out." "Clinton." "Of course." He pulled out his phone, and Flynn saw that he had already taken photographs. "Just wanted to wish you a Merry Christmas. We will talk more after the holiday. About the restructuring proposal, about your future with the company." He left, and the warmth drained out of the room with him. Serafina turned to Flynn, her expression tight with fury and fear. "I am sorry. I should not have brought you here. I did not think he would come tonight." Before Flynn could respond, the lights flickered, then again. Then the entire penthouse went dark. Through the massive windows, they could see the city below losing power block by block, the Christmas lights winking out as the blizzard that had been threatening all evening finally arrived in force. Wind howled against the glass, and snow fell so thick that the buildings across the street disappeared into white. The backup generators should have kicked in. They did not. Somewhere in the building's infrastructure, something had failed, and the tower went dark. Audrey woke with a cry, and Flynn was at her side in an instant, pulling her into his arms. "It is okay, sweetheart. Just a power outage." The storm knocked some things loose. Serafina stood frozen in the darkness, her breath coming fast and shallow. Flynn recognized the signs of panic, the same way Amanda used to freeze when the hospital machines beeped too loud or the doctors spoke too softly. He crossed the room, still holding Audrey, and touched Serafina's arm. "Hey, look at me. We are safe. The building is solid. The storm will pass." She did not respond. Her eyes were fixed on something he could not see, some memory that had her trapped. "Daddy," Audrey whispered. "I think she is scared." Flynn knelt down, bringing both of them to her level. "Do you remember what Mommy used to say about dark nights?" Audrey nodded, her fear fading into purpose. "She said dark nights are when the music matters most." Flynn retrieved his guitar from where he had left it by the fireplace. The fire still burned, casting enough light to see by, enough warmth to keep them comfortable. He pulled the sofa cushions onto the floor, created a nest of blankets and pillows, and gestured for them both to sit. "When Amanda was sick," he said quietly, "sometimes the power would go out at the hospital. All those machines, all those beeping monitors, just silence. She used to ask me to play for her, said the music reminded her that there were beautiful things in the world, even when everything felt dark. He began to play, not the carol this time, but something softer, a lullaby he had written himself during the long nights at Amanda's bedside. Audrey curled up against Serafina's side, and slowly, gradually, the tension drained out of the older woman's body. "My mother died during a blackout," Serafina whispered. "The ambulance lost power. The hospital could not save her. Every time the lights go out, I am 12 years old again, waiting for someone to tell me she is gone." Flynn kept playing, letting the music speak for him. After a while, Serafina's voice joined in, humming along with the melody, then singing softly, words she had not spoken in 20 years, her mother's carol, the song that had started this impossible night. Audrey looked up at her with sleepy eyes. "You have a pretty voice. Will you sing with us next year?" Serafina did not answer, but her arm tightened around the little girl, and something in her expression shifted from grief to wonder. The storm raged until dawn. By morning, the power was restored, the streets were being cleared, and Clinton Ward had already sent the photographs to every media contact he had cultivated over 20 years. The headlines were predictable and vicious. "Billionaire CEO's Secret Christmas," "Heart Heiress Slums, It with Service Worker," "Lonely Executive Buys Herself a Family." Flynn saw them on his phone while Audrey was still sleeping, her small face peaceful and unaware of the storm that had formed around them while she dreamed. His stomach dropped. The headlines were cruel in the way that only headlines could be, reducing a complex and beautiful evening to a scandal, a joke, a cautionary tale about rich women and poor men. This was exactly the kind of attention he had spent his whole life avoiding, the kind of spotlight that illuminated every flaw and magnified every weakness. He thought about the other cleaning staff, the delivery drivers, the people who would look at him differently now, who would wonder what he had done to get ahead, what favors he had traded. He thought about Audrey starting school next year, about the parents who would whisper behind their hands, about the children who would ask questions that no 7-year-old should have to answer. He should leave. He should take his daughter and walk away and pretend this night had never happened. But when he looked at Serafina, standing at the window with her arms wrapped around herself, watching the city wake up to news of her supposed shame, he could not make himself go. She turned to him, her face carefully blank. "I am sorry. I will make sure your job is protected. I will make sure no one bothers you. You can go now." Flynn set down his phone. "What are you going to do?" "What I always do. Damage control, press releases, lawyers." She laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Clinton wants me to sell him my shares. He has been trying to take control of Heartwave for years. Now he thinks he has leverage." "Does he?" Serafina was quiet for a long moment. "He thinks I care about my reputation more than anything else. He thinks I will do whatever it takes to make this story go away." She paused. "He is wrong." Flynn waited. "My mother never became famous," Serafina said. "She wrote beautiful music, and nobody ever heard it except the people she loved. She died thinking her songs would disappear, but they did not. Your wife found one. She carried it through her illness. She gave it to you. You gave it to your daughter. And last night, it came back to me." She turned to face him, and her eyes were wet but steady. "That matters more than any headline. That matters more than any stock price." "So what are you going to do?" Flynn asked again. Serafina smiled, and for the first time, it reached her eyes. "I am going to tell the truth." That evening, Heartwave Media held a live broadcast from the lobby of Hart Tower. The space had been transformed overnight, stripped of its corporate sterility and dressed in something warmer, more human. The committee-designed Christmas tree had been replaced by something that looked like it belonged in a family living room, decorated with handmade ornaments and soft white lights, the kind of decorations that came from craft stores and kitchen tables rather than interior design firms. A small crowd had gathered, employees who had given up their holiday evening because they believed in their CEO, journalists who sensed a story that went deeper than scandal, and curious strangers who had seen the headlines and wanted to know the rest of the story. Serafina stood at the microphone, dressed simply in a dark sweater and slacks, looking nothing like the ice queen the tabloids had painted her to be. Flynn stood beside her with Audrey, who clutched the old cassette tape in her small hands like a talisman. "My mother wrote a song for me before she died," Serafina began. "I thought it was lost forever. Last night, I heard it again for the first time in 20 years. A stranger was playing it in the city square. This stranger," she gestured to Flynn. "His wife found my mother's tape in a thrift store. She listened to it while she was fighting cancer. She made him promise to keep playing it, to share it with everyone who needed it. And somehow, impossibly, it found its way back to me." She paused, her voice catching slightly. "I have spent my whole adult life trying to be what my father wanted. Strong, cold, focused on nothing but success. I forgot that there are things in this world that matter more than quarterly earnings. I forgot that my mother believed in kindness, in connection, in the power of music to heal what seems unhealable. Last night, a blizzard knocked out the power in this building, and I sat in the dark with this man and his daughter, and we sang my mother's song together, and I remembered who I used to be, who I still want to be." She looked directly into the cameras. "The photographs you saw this morning were not evidence of a scandal. They were evidence of a miracle. Two families, broken by loss, brought together by a song that should have been forgotten. I am not ashamed of what happened last night. I am grateful." Flynn stepped forward then, his guitar in his hands. He did not speak. He did not need to. He simply began to play, and Serafina began to sing, and Audrey stood between them holding the tape that had traveled through so much darkness to reach this moment of light. The broadcast went out to millions of viewers. The comments and reactions poured in. Stories from people who had lost parents and partners and children, who had found hope in unexpected places, who recognized themselves in the tale of a billionaire and a janitor and a little girl and a song. Clinton Ward watched from his office 3 floors up, his leverage crumbling to dust. By morning, the board would have his resignation. By the end of the week, he would be gone. But that was tomorrow's concern. Tonight, the world could wait. As the broadcast ended and the crowd dispersed into the snowy night, Serafina led Flynn and Audrey back up to the penthouse. The elevator ride was different this time. Not awkward, but comfortable. The 3 of them standing close together like they had done it 1,000 times before. The city sparkled below them, cleaned by the storm, glittering with the possibility that only comes when the old has been washed away and the new has not yet arrived. Audrey fell asleep on the sofa again, exhausted by the second extraordinary day of her young life, her small hands still clutching the cassette tape that had brought them all together. Flynn and Serafina stood at the window, watching the lights. "What happens now?" he asked. "I do not know." She smiled, and it was a real smile, warm and uncertain and full of hope. "But I think I would like to find out." She paused. "If you are willing to stay." Flynn thought about Amanda, about the promise he had made to her in that hospital room, with the machines beeping and the fluorescent lights humming and her hand growing cold in his, about the way she had always believed that beautiful things happened to people who kept their hearts open. even when the world gave them every reason to close them. She would have loved Serafina. She would have seen past the wealth and the coldness and recognized the wounded girl underneath. She would have wanted this. He reached out and took Serafina's hand. Her fingers were cold, but they warmed quickly in his grip. On the coffee table behind them, the old cassette player that Serafina had found in storage began to play. Her mother's voice filled the room, singing the carol that had traveled through 2 decades and 2 families to bring them to this moment. Serafina leaned her head against Flynn's shoulder and whispered into the quiet, "I found someone to keep Christmas alive. Mama, I'm not alone anymore." Outside the window, snow began to fall again, soft and gentle, covering the city in white. Inside, the fire crackled and the music played, and 3 people who had been strangers 24 hours ago sat together in the warmth. A family not by blood, but by choice. Not by circumstance, but by the impossible, beautiful accident of a song that refused to be forgotten. And somewhere, in whatever place the dead go when they leave us. Helen Hart and Amanda Cole smiled down at the miracle they had made together, the gift they had left behind, the love that had found a way to survive.